And it's like, dude, you can't spend on coffee, period. Like, we're not drinking coffee unless it's homemade. That's because I don't have the money.
But buying that coffee makes me worry less about not having money.
It doesn't because it makes you spend.
I'm so thankful that you can't reach through the room and slap the person. I read
No,
it on
but
your
you
face.
see what I'm saying? Like,
Right. We know that prioritizing our mental health is crucial, but do you know that setting boundaries can be a powerful tool, resource to ward off, help protect you from those things that negatively impact your mental health? Well, if you want to hear more about that, please join me in this mindful focus with my special guest, Coach Maria, as we talk about the power of setting boundaries to prioritize our mental health. Let's give a listen. Those are uncomfortable conversations that people don't want to have. And
another uncomfortable conversation.
that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
That's right. What are we here to talk about today? Hey, what is it? Boundaries. Yes.
Boundaries. The most uncomfortable conversation of all.
You know, there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. Yeah. Therefore, well, let's unpack that for so many reasons. Maybe we start with what is your definition of boundary? What's about?
So, boundaries are necessary premises, precepts, lines, gates, if you will. People don't like to call them gates because
Mhm.
it's like it's a negative, but genuinely, it's this, I can go up to here
Mhm.
and you can come up to here. This is where we meet. And I say necessary because there is so much of that
Mhm.
that keeps us at peace and in check that it is vital for us to have.
Mandatory, critical, crucial.
Ugh, yes, absolutely essential. Essential.
I like that word better. So if we were to look at the dictionary, I always like that words matter. And we understand that
Yes.
their initial meaning is because they can morph into meaning other things to other people or as they,
Mm-hmm.
but boundary in the dictionary, it
Mm-hmm.
says a line that marks the limits
Mm.
of an area, a dividing line. And so thinking about having this conversation with you, I'm like, well, let me go to the dictionary and look at it. And you see about limits. Too often we will say, oh, a boundary is a fence,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to weaponize it and use it against you. Or, well, let me rephrase that. The people on the other side of our boundaries often try to refer to our boundaries as we have built and erected these fences to
Yes.
keep them out.
Uh-huh.
No, it is a limit
Mm-hmm.
on how much am I willing to participate in, endure, take from you, expose myself, and the long list of limit. I have my limit. There was a period of time where I could run a 5K. Some people
Mm.
can run marathons. I know my limit now. I'm not going to go run a 5K tomorrow or next week. Probably not next month. Maybe not next year. Why? Because it might be my last. and, and that's not because I have an issue with 5Ks.
Correct.
It's because I enjoy living.
Yes. Well, and you mentioned this, and what comes up to me is also energy management.
Mm-hmm.
It's a strategy to manage our energy.
Yes.
The way you presented it brought up one of the things I often mention to my clients, which is speaking of other people and when they're feeling threatened with our boundaries. No one that doesn't serve from you not having boundaries will be pissed at you for having boundaries.
Say that again.
So, in other words, people who have something to gain from you not having boundaries will be pissed when you start setting
Oh,
boundaries.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. I think you're in the heart emotion. Yes.
That is like a truth. And they will be uncomfortable with you setting boundaries because why? Like, why all of a sudden you are not like fully available and, always there for me? And it's like, dude, because you're draining. I
Mm-hmm.
need to replenish.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do this forever, or
Right.
maybe not. But just speaking colloquially about a boundary.
Because it cuts off or reduces their supply of you to them,
Correct. But the
which
benefit is you you have more of that for yourself,
mhm,
which you need.
right. Which, if we're talking energy here,
Correct.
if I have a pipeline from me to you, it would be okay if there were also a return pipeline. So energy exchange. So when my energy levels recede,
Mm-hmm.
they're being filled back up.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's simply a one-way pipeline and all it's going in one direction, where am I? Oh, I'm supposed to figure out, and if this pipeline is particularly draining of my energy and evaporates, sucks dry the container of energy that is there available, now I'm depleted and now I don't have enough to even function, let alone if there's any others, but just for me. Hence a boundary. I,
Mm-hmm.
I won't allow my gas tank needle to go below a quarter of a tank. Why? Because of the residue that's in the bottom of the gas tank that can dirty up the injectors in the engine, cost money. In case of emergency, in case
Mm-hmm.
I have to drive somewhere I wasn't anticipating and won't have time to stop for gas.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel more that's a boundary. I don't
Correct.
have anything against the car, the gas station, the tank. That it's not a negative. It is managing. That's an energy supply, gasoline, and
Correct.
we do the same as humans. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. And it's totally acceptable. It's not only acceptable, it's essential that people do this. I think half, no, what half? 85%, 90% of the work I do with people is around, first of all, the understanding that boundaries are necessary. Second of all, assessing what are the boundaries that you need to have.
Mm,
Third, implementation. And then fourth, which is like navigating that discomfort with the implementation, the reactions from people, because there's a price to pay for knowing who you are and what you need. And
yes,
that
yes.
sometimes is resistance from others.
So there's something you said, and it's quiz time.
Mhm.
Different types of boundaries. I have the cheat sheet. I have the answers here. But there are different types of boundaries. Name a few. You don't have to do them all. 7 is what I'm going for.
7.
Uh-huh. Unless you just want me
Oh.
to tell you the answers, I can do that too.
Yes, tell
Okay,
me
good.
the
Let's do
answers
that.
because I don't
Okay, course later.
I don't when I do this work, I find it's easier to just ask the person, like, what do you feel you need? Because I feel like a lot of us don't actively assess this
Mm-hmm.
until we're like deep down in
Yes.
like the realization that it's like, oh my God, I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
And I'm there. And what do I do now?
Yes.
So, yeah, but I'd be happy. Like, please educate me.
Right. No, it's just naming it. And I want to be careful to say little in the mental health space is finite, exact. These are 7. There could be, I never want to say, this is it. This is no, it's just not right. Well, that's again another conversation. So let's talk about the 7. So we have mental, emotional, time, physical, conversational,
Mhm.
material. And here's one that we often overlook, and you were just speaking to internal.
Mhm.
And that I was thinking of getting to that later in the conversation, but really that's a good place to focus on early on in that our internal boundaries, the most important relationship we can have is the one we have with ourselves. So if we
Mhm.
set internal boundaries for ourselves, we then learn how to set boundaries with the most difficult human being on the face of the planet, ourselves,
Correct.
which gives us practice to be able to put those boundaries in place with others. But more important than that, the benefit of setting those boundaries is we get to reap the rewards of having done so.
Mhm.
What are we in the internal, obviously then morphs into all of those areas. But what limits am I putting on? This brain is saying go and do and give and take and withstand and tolerate, even just the internal dialogue.
Mhm.
And when we say, yeah, no, not so much. I'm not with that right now. All you guys over there, you need to shut up.
Yeah.
We've had just about enough of you. Some of the party and the hit, you're evicted. Get out, get out, get out. And I want my peace, and I'm going to have peace, and we're going to have quiet, and we're not going to
Yes.
worry and obsess and overthink, and you just the types of behaviors that we take, do, conduct, act that harm ourselves. Internal, we could do one podcast on just internal boundaries,
Yes.
but it kind of just segued from what you were just talking about, that internal, how much, yeah.
Well, and it actually kind of reminded me of a conversation I was having with a client yesterday where we talked about something I had heard recently where it's like the power of choice. This is not something you consume. This is not something that you're going to like get a playbook for. This is not, you're not going to eat it. You're not going, this is a choice you're going to make internally to say, first of all, assess what's my energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then second, make the decision of where is it that you draw those lines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for your benefit and for the benefit of the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a concept that I also always we we have to change our framework around this. It's kind of the funnel effect. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
if I set the foundation for myself, if I know what works for me, what doesn't, and like you said, if I can make this deal with myself and decide on something, then the rest is easy peasy. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the true negotiation that goes is with ourselves,
Right.
where we are willing to put in, where we are willing to withdraw, where we're willing to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
these and assess that. So it's an internal process where you have to be very honest about things.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about where you are in general? And then all these things come into play: time, emotions, conversations, physical, you know, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you know who you are and you cultivate that and you check in with yourself and you know, then it becomes much easier to establish the rest.
So being your authentic self, ooh, being honest with yourself, that's scary. Uh, but, but if we're not, then if we're dishonest and being a facade, not being our authentic selves, and then we act in a way in behaviors, and then we begin to build on this false foundation, and then we want to, and then, how many times does that happen?
The
Where
castles of sand.
right, thank you. The waves are going to their high tide is coming on a regular basis, yet we continue to go right on the edge and build this castle, and it's ornate and it's wow, it's fantastic, and it's a solid uh-oh. um
Not only that, but I mean, when you genuinely sit and look at it, even if it's a fantastic castle,
mhm,
if it's not built on who you truly are and what you want,
right.
then
Ooh,
there's no castle that's going to make you happy.
no.
You can pretend and you can say and you can find the positives and you can, but you know, I root much more for knowing who you are and basing your other relationships and interactions based on that.
It's not going to be fulfilling. What we talked about
Mm-hmm.
last time, satiating. It's not going to be rewarding. it
Mm-hmm.
it like eating food that's bad for you for that time that you might be enjoying it, but the aftermath of the calories or the sugar or whatever, it, it that's that's what some of the manufacturers depend on. you
Mm-hmm.
you wanting more right away. It's like go get a bigger bag or another bag or buy
Correct.
five when they're on sale. So but wait, when we're talking about energy, when we're talking about boundaries and energy, so easy to set aside as material, right? Physical things, the boundary and how much I'll loan somebody, which easy to do. By the way, I won't loan money. If I have it, I'll
Mm-hmm.
give it to you. And if I don't have it to give, then the answer is no. That's pretty cut and dry. Because
Mm-hmm.
if we're at a point where I would uh, loan you, if the relationship is at that point, then I would be okay with giving it. And so again, that's material. So the material and physical, I talked about that they're running the 5K or the marathon, and then time. I'm talking about tangible things that well, time is um, those three.
Mm-hmm.
We set those aside, but what we're talking about is energy, which then is the mental, emotional, internal, and then conversational. And you touched on that. How long am I going to be involved in this conversation that does not serve me, that is toxic, perhaps, that isn't isn't giving me energy, but it's sapping the life out of me, because it either lacks an authenticity, or it's negative, or it's gossip, disparaging someone for no good reason, because someone may want to their behavior, they may want to make themselves feel less worse about themselves. So let me just engage in conversation where we can just talk trash about somebody else. We're not obligated. What I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
to sit and entertain that with any human. If
Mm-hmm.
if our energy reserves are being depleted, either rapidly or one small iota, it's just if we look at time as money, if we look at our energy as a commodity, with it regenerates, but at any one given time we only have so much in this period. And then when it's gone, it's gone. We recharge our watches, and we recharge our phones. Most things have batteries, cars now, and they have to be recharged. If I
Mm-hmm.
if I take a electric car, go out on the freeway, and mash the pedal to the floor on a straightaway, and the car can manage that. At some point, I'm going to run out.
Yes.
I just hope it's not in Death Valley.
Hopefully. If it's in Tulum, then I'm fine with it. But then other than that,
Wow. So
um, a few things before I forget, because there's so much to this. And I think so. You mentioned a material, you mentioned physical, you mentioned the other one, the third one,
time.
time. And then you mentioned energy. And I tend to see these all kind of together in a way that it works, kind
Uh-huh.
of in a spiral, sort of, may we
Great
say.
point. Great point.
So either we're in a loop where nothing is enough and everything is always scarce, and we're kind of catching up and not being able to, you know, it was at 7 p.m. and I got in at 7:10, and then I left at 8:30, and then I was supposed to be here at 8:25, but then I got in at 8:45. And so it's like a mess and the
Mm-hmm.
non-ending, story. Then we have kind of this spiral where, again, we bring it back to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fully aware this is the energy I have.
Mm-hmm.
And then these are the aspects that are important to me. For example, you mentioned material. I wouldn't even go to the loan part. I would first bring it to simple things, Mr. Nate. Budgeting.
Yeah.
People are always like so worried about not having money, but then they buy $6 coffees every morning. It's like, it's those little tweaks.
Mm-hmm.
Boundaries, dude. This is my budget. This is like, it's that board of directors talk that you have with the voices you mentioned. And, I have a meeting with my board, and it's like, dude, you can't spend on coffee, period. Like, we're not drinking coffee unless it's homemade. That's because I don't have the money.
But buying that coffee makes me worry less about not having money.
It doesn't, because it makes you spend.
I'm so thankful that you can't reach through the room and slap the person. I read
No,
it on
but
your
you see what
face.
I'm saying? Like,
Right.
for example, in time, um, I don't have time to exercise.
Mm.
And I really want to lose weight. But then I do spend 120 minutes on Netflix
Hmm.
or binging on whatever show of choice you have at the moment.
Docile, sitting on the couch, not moving.
So, I mean, you do have time.
Hmm.
That's why the assessment part is so important because it allows you to prioritize. And then that's why the honesty component is more important, even if it makes you uncomfortable, because it helps you, kind of see what am I willing to do? And what am I willing to not? And then that's where the boundaries come.
Right.
Okay, I have I have my energy. This is the energy I have. These are the things I need to do. I have to pay attention to my time. I have to pay attention to my material resources. I have to pay attention to um I keep forgetting the other one. Um what was the other one? Material.
Material, time, physical, emotional, conversational, internal, and mental.
Physical, and then, mental, emotional,
Hmm.
conversational.
Hmm.
But then again, the spiral, when you start assessing and you realistically look at this,
Hmm.
and then you say, okay, this is the bandwidth I have. You start evaluating, like, genuinely, oh my God, energy is finite. I actually have a limited number of credits, to call it, for the day.
Right.
And then hopefully that helps you tap into how you expend that energy and how much value you actually put into your interactions and and your engagements and what you want to dedicate your time to.
Hmm.
Which brings us back to the beginning premise that you had. It's like, no, which, excuse my French, but you know how I am. This was bound to happen, Mr. Nate. Ain't nobody got time for that shit.
Right.
Like, I don't have time for bullshit
Hmm.
because I'm well aware that my time is finite. There's a really good guru out there, Don DePani, and
Hmm.
he talks about that. He's like, when you realize your energy is finite
Right.
and you start living, then boundaries are sacred. They
Yes.
become your favorite tool. They're
Absolutely.
like, because you value your time
Hmm.
and you value your interactions
Right.
and you know where you're putting your energy and you know where you don't want to put it.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the highest aspiration, right?
Right.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, it's a way of
Yeah.
not wasting your energy on $6 coffees. If 6 joules, six whatever of energy, you made a lot of great points too. Really stood out. One, all of these are interconnected. They're not separate silos, and
Mhm.
you you can loan money or interact financially, materially, borrow the car, whatever, with another individual. And if that doesn't, if you don't have that boundary in place and respect that boundary, it is absolutely going to impact you on your energy side, on your time. It's going to impact your mental health and well-being when they crash your car and total it. Now you got to go buy a new one, and there'll be some conversations that ensue there that
Oh,
probably are they're all
that
interconnected.
are
So I'm
probably
so
going to make you more uncomfortable than the discomfort of saying, you know what? I don't have that dough. Not today.
it this so again, very glad that you brought up they're not separate. They're interconnected, and probably the key takeaway from that is if we manage our boundaries like a business, we're not just arbitrarily putting boundaries in place because of just an emotion thing, although that's perfectly fine and acceptable. I want to have peace and I want to be happy, and so I'm going to put a boundary in place where we're going to have very limited interaction because you're a peace thief. because you're toxic. Because so that would be fine. But if again, from a business standpoint, I'm trying to manage what I have. And if I put these boundaries in place, that will reap me any business model. Why are we doing this? If you're a for-profit entity, you're a nonprofit or mission, that's fine. But the profit is how are for us as individuals, how are we spending our energy and what are we getting in return from it, and what is the benefit to us. And that benefit, by the way, of replenishing that energy can be life sustaining. So it's not greed, it's actually necessary. Try not eating for a month or drinking water for a week, and or maybe not breathing for a few minutes, and you'll find out very quickly there are some things that are necessary for our survival. So to give forethought
Mhm.
into our boundaries is the point I heard you making, to manage it for our best possible outcome, knowing where it is that we want to the destiny, well, not destiny, the journey that we are embarking on, and what needs to take place to ensure to some degree that that will go smoothly, or at least with the least amount of resistance and challenges and difficulty. So, if again, looking at it from a proactive
Mm.
way of managing to prevent bad things from happening, can make boundaries then become our friends. And what the point I'm trying to drive to is, we shouldn't feel guilty about setting boundaries
Yes.
that help us.
Yeah. I mean, there's as much an element of self-preservation. I mean, as basic as self-preservation
Mhm.
to as deep as this ensures my peace of mind
Mm.
in general.
Right.
So it feeds both.
Mhm.
And I think that's why, like, as you know, I love boundary. For me, it's kind of like, every time they test it, it's like, oh,
Mm.
I, ah, it's like the meme. It's a fuck around, find out. Yeah.
Electric fence.
No, sometimes, it's just for the fun of it. No, I'm joking. But it is because at this point in my life, anyway, I'm
Sure.
not, you become acquainted with them, and then you realize they're your friends, and
Yes.
they're here to help you self-preserve,
Right. It's
you
not
know?
against them, it's for you.
Well, and not only them, but yourself. Again, I think this is a process that starts with self. Like,
Mhm.
the initial testing is with yourself, and how much
Mm.
you can hold yourself
Okay.
accountable,
Okay. Okay.
like boundaries. I only stay in bed until a certain time, because afterwards that's just not productive for me.
Hmm.
There are other people who can spend a whole day in bed, a day of the week. That's
Right.
fine too.
Right.
You need to know what works for you.
Right. Right.
But when you know that, then it's magic,
Hmm.
because then you start saying, okay, well, I want to dedicate 50 minutes to this, or I scheduled a call, but I only have this amount of time for it, or I am meeting up with friends who I know I can only see once a month and check in.
Hmm.
It's just it permeates all the aspects of life. It just feels like, and when you know that bandwidth, and you know how to regulate, and you kind of like are aware about this,
Right.
it flows. It might sound like it's work, and that's a conversation I have with clients often too. It's work in the beginning, yes, because
Sure.
you're you're working against patterns that are instilled in your brain and your, like you mentioned earlier, for example, the guilt factor.
Right.
If you're establishing boundaries with family members, there's the guilt factor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like, oh my gosh, I feel selfish. I feel okay, that's okay. You can
Mm-hmm.
feel a range of emotions.
Right.
That's another tab. We can discuss that and how you can manage that.
Right.
However, in order to make these changes that you aspire to be able to become second nature so you can be at peace, these things, the uncomfortable work is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It has to happen.
And that's the key. It's not putting the boundaries in place that is the work. It's changing the behaviors. That's where the work,
Daily, moment to moment, sometimes.
unending, but it's
It's like,
a behavioral change.
yes, like one that comes up really often is boundaries with work.
Mm. What are those?
Oh, I know. No, I'm just joking. No, I'm not joking. Honestly, like I boundaries with work are so important to be able, if you are able to see that this is not linear, like this is not like, oh, I'm going to meet that dot and then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spiral and you're going and you're going. And so you
Right.
want to make it sustainable, then you need to have those boundaries.
Yep.
There are projects that come to an end. I remember in college or whatever, I was that kind of person where I would wait until the night before and then I'd spend 8 hours writing an essay. Yeah. I mean, for that, it works because
Right.
I know I'm going to turn in the essay and then I don't have to see the professor or that, ever again.
Right.
But when it comes to things that are part of your life and will most likely be part of your life, you
Mm-hmm.
want to put these interventions in place for sustainability purpose, for to self preserve,
Mm-hmm.
and to make the ride enjoyable,
Sustainability.
even if at times it's uncomfortable.
It's going to be any venture. I I'm hard pressed to think of a single venture, something new I have not done before, different, that didn't require some amount of or degree of effort. And often the more effort, as long as it was building momentum, the greater the benefit, the payback. Yes, there were some ventures that put effort into and it was a loss. Yeah, that we want to assess that. But when we're talking about this isn't working,
Mhm.
this doesn't feel good. This is either depleting my energy or causing frustration, or causing stress or anxiety or unrest or even just a disruption in peace. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. In
I mean, I'd say I beg to say that's the biggest one.
it actually is because I was feeling
If it costs you your peace of mind,
that's really expensive.
it's not worth it.
No,
That's kind of a mantra, like if it's costing you, there's one in Spanish, but it's, you wouldn't understand, and it's like major cussing, which we're keeping it PG. But I
you
say
have
it
to
to my
mark that
friends.
on YouTube.
Yeah, I say it to my friends often. It's like, dude, if it costs you your peace, it's too expensive.
It is
It's a
very
lifestyle.
yes.
It's a lifestyle.
That is that eh, maintaining our level of peace should be the norm and the top priority. And I'm so
Correct.
glad again you you pointed that out. It shouldn't be like an afterthought or the lowest priority, or it, if we start there, then it's really easy to identify those things that negatively impact that. And then if we're in that state of peace, we're much better able to make decisions that are healthy, or our behaviors or actions can be healthy, because it's all about maintaining that. We back to the business plan, the business objective,
Mhm.
right? Will this disturb my peace? Will this result in? What are the implications to? And that can help us as it filters into everything we do. Yeah, there are some things that we have to do that aren't fun, that aren't enjoyable, that suck,
Yeah.
and may momentarily that are necessary. Um, but if we're viewing that as necessary, is that disturbing our peace, or is that adulting, doing things that we know that we need to do, that at this in this moment, in this present moment, it may not feel good, and
Mhm.
but we know that in the if we look at the long term impacts, it will preserve our peace. The point is,
It's an
it's not.
investment.
Thank you. Right, with
Yes.
some sort of a payback.
Hmm.
It's just, you take your paycheck, and when you just, rather than using that money to buy ice cream, and you invest it, or $6 coffee. If you just took the
Hmm.
$6 coffee and invested it, you know,
Correct.
yeah, I'm my peace is disrupted because I'm not able to enjoy my my Starbucks. Down the road, when you're able to buy a boat or a vacation home, or go on a vacation because your investment residual um, gave you
Or
a
in these days,
return.
even like pay the rent or be with the bills, you
Oh,
know.
you mean
I
have a
just
roof over my head?
I bring it to the table because I've had these conversations, and it's really, kind of the short term versus the long term. Like
Yeah.
you say, the approach is business wise, and thinking about it in a cost benefit and investment way serves a lot. And
Yeah.
then in hierarchy, like human hierarchy of needs, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's that peace of mind. Like if we are able to establish that this is our priority, but then this also it can be so basic, but then it's the highest, higher, like
Yeah.
as highest as we can get, then we're insulating ourselves
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have a more than just surviving existence,
Yeah.
which in my eyes, in my heart, and in my mind, and in my soul, it's what I aspire to anyway. Not
Yeah.
everybody has to aspire to it. And so we talk about hard decisions and painful situations that
Mm-hmm.
come up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for example, drawing boundaries with family members is a big one that brings a lot of sorrow, a lot of painful, emotions, and a lot of those little things. And then sometimes people are like, well, I'll suck it up
Mm-hmm.
because I want to stay at peace with the other one. But
Mm-hmm.
then, and this is something else I heard, ask to you who are trying to make everybody happy, ask yourself who is actually happy in that department.
Right.
And then you find no one is happy of the people you're trying to make happy.
Mm-hmm.
You have grown resentful and
Mm.
are quite frankly pissed at
Mm-hmm.
the dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is bound to explode at some point, my
Yeah.
friend.
Yes. Gasoline and fire. So yeah, I love how you just break it down in real world terms. Let's not talk about the vacation of the boat. Survival.
I mean, I love
if
the vacation and the boat, but
yeah, it's nice, but
oh, absolutely.
we're here now. If we set a boundary with intention, so I'm going to not spend $6 a day on coffee this month to ensure that at the end of the month or the beginning of the month when rent is due, I don't have to worry about being able to pay that rent or water or lights or electricity or whatever the case may be. So again, that's a boundary with intention. The same with family members. A great point. If I choose to abstain from not use my time and energy to engage in a toxic interaction, relationship, discussion, even visit that will drain my energy, boundary, then I will have that energy available for, oh, I don't know, when I'm at work and something doesn't go well, and I'm not going to be, I'll be able to withstand that, or getting cut off in traffic, or whatever I have, I'll have that energy available to me for when I need it. But if I go and I deplete it, and again, how many times with family? That's probably
Hmm.
one of the biggest, probably the second most biggest boundary area. With the one we set with ourselves internally for our peace is with family, because those are the people
Hmm.
we let our guard down with, and we expose ourselves, or we're more vulnerable to being wounded with. Those are probably the second most important boundaries to set, because to not drain ourselves of that energy, of that being like we're gifting them something, making them happy, but they're not. They just want
Hmm.
to suck the energy out of us, if you will, because they're unhappy with themselves.
Hmm.
And before we know it, we look around. It, it is tragic to interact with any human, but especially family. When you leave depleted, you're not uplifted. You're not better off. You're not inspired. Um, Even zero is, because now you've spent your time, but to feel worse off for having no, no. And that's a complete sentence. Thank you for joining us for this part one of this incredible discussion. Hopefully you've gained some insights that resonate with you, and I do appreciate your giving a listen. As always, with any of the content that I share, feel free to try it or toss it. Both of those can be correct answers, but only you can determine which of those works for yourself. If you like this content, please do give a like, subscribe, follow, hit the notification bell so you know when I post additional content like this, so you're made aware, and share this with somebody who you feel might benefit from it. Act of kindness. And as always, remember to let go, live now, and win.